Hello, Kuman229 here with another Topic of the Week video. I apologize for this being late. Along with having a pretty busy weekend, I've been playing Breath of the Wild pretty much non-stop, and it's been a distraction. This week's topic is going to be on Kung Fu Panda. This week's topic was submitted by Angel89, and her topic is: the Kung Fu Panda movies managed not to rehash or repeat its story, but only grow and expand. What are your thoughts on each message of each movie? The impact it leaves on you? How about Poe as a character? Why does he work so well as a lead when we've seen this character before several times? Do you think he teaches as much as he has taught in each movie regarding the themes? Now, the Kung Fu Panda movies are the last trilogy of movies that you would expect to be good. I mean, it's a movie about a fat panda voiced by Jack Black learning Kung Fu. This is like, you would think this is scraping the bottom of the barrel from DreamWorks. But no, they're surprisingly some of DreamWorks' best movies. Who would have thought? And the main reason, apart from the obvious, strong artistic element, is, well, the writing. The writing of these movies is really solid and surprisingly good over the course of a trilogy. Honestly, I think I can name on one hand the number of trilogies that I've seen, of movies that I've seen, that have been consistently good or better. And the Kung Fu Panda trilogy is one of them. Now, the point is that it didn't rehash its stories, and this is really interesting. Well, you do have the same basic premise. You have a bad guy. Bad guy's strong. Bad guy has some sort of beef with Poe. And Poe, has to learn something to fight them. But it's funny, how diverse each movie makes this. In Kung Fu Panda 1, you had the story of Tai Lung. And this is where you really learn his relationship with Shifu as a son, really. And you see how much his betrayal really, just destroyed Shifu. And you understand this is why his bitterness, this is why when he was raising Tigress and training her, he didn't show her the love that he showed Tai Lung because, well, he didn't want to get attached that way. He didn't want to create another Tai Lung, which is why Tigress grew up to be so bitter and serious. And really, in terms of locations, it doesn't really leave the valley much. You get a couple locations like the bridge and the prison. I don't remember what it was called, but and really, that's where a lot of this movie takes place. And you have the temple and everything. The sequel actually moves this around quite a bit with a lot of exploring and visiting the Imperial City. I watched these movies just this weekend with Angel89, and I'm trying to remember the details of that. But yeah, they moved to the city to fight Shen. Then you have the Penguin Village. Gotta get Dragon Ball out of my head. The Panda Village, the decrepit Panda Village. And then you have Shen is tied heavily into Poe's backstory, and is the reason why he is supposedly the last panda. They genocided all the pandas he could find. And it's funny because the second and the Kung Fu Panda 2 actually fulfills the darker second chapter that so many stories seem to get wrong. It's not inherently more dark, but it's, the elements of stories that it touch on does get darker than Kung Fu Pandas 1 or 3. Having Shen go genocide on the pandas in order to avoid having to fight one, because that was supposed to lead to his doom. That's some pretty dark stuff. And we also see just how much this affects Poe, and it's a lot more personal for Poe that time. In the third movie, you have Kai. And, it's the story of Kai and his connection to Oogway, really. And then, of course, he has a beef to pick with Poe. Because, he's, going after the pandas and their chi. And, then you have some locations, especially with the secret panda village. some of the locations that they fight Kai in. But what's really interesting is that each movie builds on each other. The first movie is the most basic. Like I said, it didn't really move its locations around. Might be budget of keeping it all in a singular, area, so they don't have to constantly animate a whole bunch of new places. But regardless, it worked for what it was, and it was an introduction and setup for the next two movies. But it had its own good story. Ultimately, the lesson of Kung Fu Panda 1 is you don't need something else to make you special. You have that within you already. It's the point of the Dragon Scroll and its connecting metaphor. The secret ingredient soup, which has no secret ingredient. Plot twist. And that's ultimately what Po learns. That's really what the whole thing builds on in the movie, especially when Shifu actually, starts training Po specifically. He realizes that his traditional way of teaching works for the five, but when it comes to Po's not a standard martial artist. He's not a standard person. He's a fat panda. But Shifu learned that he could use food to motivate him, and through this actually taught him Kung Fu. And it was the lesson that, and it's something Shifu specifically states, is that he realizes that he can't simply teach him standard stuff and then expect Po to instantly learn it. Po's a quick learner, and especially when he picks up the wushu finger hold, but you can't teach him just the normal way. And I do like this, and in school I was very much kind of learned differently. I'm very much a visual learner. I get my hands on stuff. I see stuff. You draw something out on a board, and it's easier for me to comprehend when that's done and specifically explained than just someone explaining. And that works for some people, but not for me. And I like this idea, and I like this as being a theme of the movie and a message in it, that not everyone is going to work. Not everyone is going to work well with a very specific teaching style. Some people are going to work well for its own, like Tigress thrives under that type of teaching style, but Po needed something different. And a lot of different people need different types of teaching. And I like that as an element in the movie, and ultimately teaching that you don't need to, change yourself. You don't need to conform, and you don't need to get something extra to make yourself become worthy. Because you are. You don't need to gain anything in order to become better or inherently better. And I like that. And ultimately you see that Tai Lung just didn't get it. Now what's really interesting about Tai Lung, really, in connection to the actual story, and this is actually something that I think applies to all three villains, and it's a common thread. It's funny because each of these villains are so radically different in personality, in demeanor, in personality. Did I say personality? Yeah, but they all carry some very similar threads. One of them being, that they're all too far gone, and you see that with each movie, and you can see Po generally. I think outside of he didn't do it with Kai because Kai's the big evil bad. He does understand. Po does understand. What's going on, and you see that especially with Tai Lung and Shen, that they're too far gone. I don't know if I mentioned this during my villains, my Kung Fu Panda villains topic video, but one thing that I really liked is that Po doesn't just instantly go in wanting to fight them, really. And when he does beat them, and he has Tai Lung and Po, or Tai Lung and Shen on the ropes, he's like, we can chill out here. And he even with Tai Lung, he's trying to explain basically the what the Dragon Scroll means, and but Tai Lung has been so obsessed with gaining this power that when he finds out that there is no actual power, he realizes he spent 20 years suffering and even longer during his training, building up this idea of the dragon scroll. It's going to give you this immense power. No, you have to get that power yourself, because you don't gain any quick ways. And I do like that. And Shen, when after Po basically attains inner peace, and he decimates Shen's cannons, and he doesn't really want to fight Shen, but Shen had gone nuts, and he's just like, all that time of all that suffering, losing his parents, losing his family, losing his home, and all of that suffering was for nothing. Again, a common thread, mainly between Shen and Tai Lung. But I think I'm deviating a little bit, talking about the villains. I already talked about the villains. The message in the first movie, like I said, is that you make you special. What you do makes you special. You don't need to get some magical item and gain power. You don't need to attain something certain to be powerful. Po didn't need anything to become the Dragon Warrior. He became the Dragon Warrior through his own hard work and training. And in the second movie, inner peace is very much heavily emphasized in that, and it's coming to terms with your past, and it's also the different ways of you kind of it's a lot about letting go of the past. Shen, compared to Po, couldn't let go. And even when he sees that Po could let go, Po basically wasn't furious at him for killing the pandas. As far as he knew, he didn't know that there were any more pandas, because you don't find out until the stinger at the end of the movie. He realized that holding on to that and obsessing over it doesn't do him any good. And he realizes that the only way to go is forward. He can't sit here having these feelings fester, and it was just constantly eating at him throughout the movie. Finding things out, the sudden feelings of incompetence, trying to find out where he came from is another big part of the movie. And that feeling of someone who's adopted, trying to find out why did my parents not want me, and you're like, why is he an orphan, or why was he adopted? Like, what happened to his parents? And he has these fears of how that his parents replaced him with a radish in this weird surreal dream, that feeling that his parents thought he was worthless. He was as worthless as he was just worth a vegetable. Is radish a vegetable? Worth a radish. But so, he started having all these issues, and, his dad, who'd raised him for his whole life, wasn't his dad. And, Po's dad is a great character, and it really comes to a T in Kung Fu Panda 3. But, really, letting go of the past, I think, is probably, being able to attain some sort of inner stability is really the big part of Kung Fu Panda 2. And what's interesting is that this really builds on something that you hadn't really thought about from Kung Fu Panda 1. Po's the only panda we see. Why is that? I mean, we know he was raised by a goose, but it's like, okay, why? And it's really not something you think about. It's not really a question you ask in a movie like this. He's a Kung Fu Panda in a village full of rabbits and sheep and bunnies and stuff. But, and you find out that there's actually a pretty dark reason for that. That that Shen committed genocide of the pandas, and and his mother, to save him, stuck him in a cart in a box of radishes, and basically sacrificed herself, being killed by Shen and his wolves, to let Po live. And then that was delivered to the valley. And it's wow. And Po, when he realizes this, he finds, as he's discovering things and he's getting hints of the past, it really hurts him throughout the movie until he learns to let it go. And he's able to attain inner peace through that. In his own suffering. Just like Shifu did. But instead of, he just didn't remain bitter for 20 years like Shifu did. Now, with Kung Fu Panda 3, this harkens back in some ways to the original movie. He didn't need to teach the panda, in the end, he didn't need to teach the pandas Kung Fu. He used their skills and he, basically taught them how to use them, weaponize those skills to fight Kai. And you also have the whole thing about Kai and Uguay's backstory, where they were both warlords, on the path of conquering, and then their meeting with the pandas led to two very different outcomes. With this immense power of chi, Uguay learned that he could do better, and through the pandas learned that he could be a better person. That he and ultimately he laid the basis of Kung Fu, and became a very wise mentor. Meanwhile, Kai saw this power and is like, I can gain more. So you have these two different reactions from two characters who I would expect to be fairly similar at that time. Where they were both, warriors, and then Uguay became, still a warrior and still very powerful. Had basically dedicated himself to peace rather than to violence. And really, it's a tale of greed. Of when with great power comes great responsibility, and Uguay shows this responsibility, and Kai doesn't, and ultimately this corrupts him so much that even in the spirit realm, he's just obsessing over power. Excuse me. The messages of each movie are interesting because they do link to each other. They work very much so in their own individual stories, but seeing overall, you can see a lot of this affecting Poe and Poe's different story. In the first movie, you can see that Poe has he's learning that he can actually be a Kung Fu Panda, basically, to sum that up. And ultimately, you see him and his relationship with Shifu, and his mentorship with Shifu, and his friendship with Tigress specifically. And through that, both Poe grows because he does become a little more mature. He's still goofy, but he becomes more mature and more understanding of his responsibilities. And Shifu and Tigress, considering their links to the story, both grow, and you see this really at the end of the movie with Shifu when he's training Poe, and he's smiling again, he's having fun. He's realizing that he doesn't have to be serious. And then, Tigress, you see throughout the movies, she becomes more caring, and, she does have these moments with Poe, which I think I've already talked about that in my Poe and Tigress video. But, and really you see these, and it's funny, rewatching these movies is so much better, because you can see that the 2 and 3 retroactively improve 1. Because you have this backstory to 1 that you don't have initially. You have this backstory to both Poe and the Dark, and Poe's dad, and then you have Kai and Uguay, and you see all this stuff, and you see things like when Uguay first sees Poe in the first Kung Fu Panda movie, he sees him and he's like, oh, how interesting. And at first you would think it's just because he fell out of the sky. But then once you find out about Uguay's connection with the pandas and why, how special the pandas were, and that Uguay had a very, good relationship with the pandas, he sees this panda after they were supposedly killed. And, right when he's choosing the Dragon Warrior, knowing that, pandas are powerful with chi, they are, clearly, this is going to be the Dragon Warrior. And it's interesting stuff like that. Honestly, I feel like the impact of each movie is... the fact that it impacts me at all is saying something. Because I can watch a lot of movies, and even movies I enjoyed, I rarely think that they impact me. But when I watch Kung Fu Panda movies, I actually feel emotional. From everything, from the story, to the jokes, to the levity, to the seriousness, to the darkness, to the triumphs, to the lessons, to the art. It feels like an experience, and it feels like I'm actually watching a movie made by people who love what they're doing, who care, and that's one of the big things about this. When each movie has an important a lesson, and I already talked about I like some of these lessons, but the fact that it actually does have a solid lesson and it doesn't feel ham-fisted, it feels like it's custom built to the story. Now, mostly the story is I would say it's very logical to say the story is built around the lesson, but the story of Tai Lung, the story of Shen, the story of Kai, all of these, and the characters that they connect to, all serve the story and the plot, and the emotions of the story. Even watching Kung Fu Panda 2 again, when you see Po realizing what happened to the pandas, and who Shen is, and why Shen is so baffled that he doesn't recognize him. He's like, you're a panda, I killed the pandas. And it's so interesting when you see, and there are these moments, I would have to say Tigress has a big moment like this in Kung Fu Pandas 2 and 3. And I think this really kind of leaves an impact, because I think there's I think I talked about this in my Po and Tigress video, but it's relevant here. When she goes and tries to help him in both cases, she's trying to tell him to stop and not go after Shen in Kung Fu Panda 2. And it looks like they're about to get into a tussle. They're about to fight. Po and Tigress are about to fight, because Po's not going to stand down. He's not going to, let Shen get away. But, he obviously has problems when it comes to, these memories. And Tigress recognizes that he's having a problem, but ultimately... and he thinks that she's trying to just stop him, and she gives him one of the few hugs that she ever gives, if not the only hug, that, and she says that she doesn't want her friend to die. And it's like, oh yeah, this isn't being done out of, cruelty or meanness, she's doing this out of care, even if it's one of the few moments she does it. And in Kung Fu Panda 3, when everyone, when the Five and Shifu are defeated, and she goes to the Panda Village to warn Po about Kai coming for him. She has a moment where she basically, Po basically goes into training, just regular training, and she basically has to stop him. This isn't how you defeat Kai, and she has to snap him out of that. And that's ultimately he makes the decision. Oh, I can't just do this, but he says I don't have the chi power, but I can get the pandas, and he basically builds his panda army. And it's weird. It's a lot of small moments like that. There's multiple stuff like that, like when Shifu trains him. A lot of the moments between Po and his dad in Kung Fu Panda 3, especially when Lee is talking about Po's mother, and it's this really somber, sad stuff. Or when you see Po's dad, his adopted father, with Lee, and you see this jealousy, because you saw shades of this in 1 and 2, but in 3 it's brought to the forefront because Po's real dad is here, and he feels like he's going to get left behind, and and it's this weird, and ultimately the lesson there is that being an adoptive parent is no less important than being a biological parent. And the fact of the matter is, what mattered is that they both loved Po. They're both his father. And, he does have a great relationship with both of them. And it's stuff like that, and the fact, I do kind of get choked up sometimes watching these movies, and it's just because it's so well done. It's really funny, actually. But now Poe as a character is interesting because he is very much a stereotype, not a stereotype, an archetype that we've seen. He's the big dreamer who has ambitions, but obviously due to his life and his the cards that fate has dealt him, he's never going to do anything. He's obviously just going to sit in his noodle shop with his dad for the rest of his life, even though he dreams of being a kung fu master. But then of course fate intervenes and he gets the chance to do this despite the fact that everything is stacked against him. And ultimately, through his hard work and determination, along with some help, he becomes the hero that he always dreamed of being. It's very classical, in storytelling. But what matters here really is the fact that the writing is good. It may be a cliche, but just because something's cliche doesn't mean it can't be done well. And that's the big thing about these types of movies. Sure, you can take the basic premise. Like I said, you can apply the basic premise and apply it to each movie. It's the same movie if you break it down to the most basic elements. But the writing is so good, and it goes out of its way to diversify each movie in different ways, that you can see that this isn't the same story being rehashed. It's a different story with different characters and different lessons for Poe. And Poe really, and the fact that Poe does grow from each of these, and in some cases, you see the fact that, he can learn stuff like the Wuxi finger hold, and the fact that he attains inner peace, and even going up against Kai, he kind of got a little overconfident that he could get him, and even trying to utilize the Wuxi finger hold doesn't work on Kai, because even when he was able to grab him and do it, he finds out, oh, Kai's technically dead, so it doesn't work on basically the undead. So then he basically had to, figure out his own way. And it's interesting, really, that I noticed this in each movie. Poe basically, the trilogy basically leads up to Poe becoming the Kung Fu master he dreamed of being in the first movie. And it's all down to even to the outfit. In the end of Kung Fu Panda 3, when he's in the spirit realm with Oogway, the way he's dressed is almost identical, if not identical, to his dream self in Kung Fu Panda, the beginning of Kung Fu Panda 1. I believe it's the opening. And and even in the end of the movie, when you see him coming through the smoke, he has what you find out to be a pan on his head and some apron flopping, and it looks like a cape and a hat. And it's funny because you can see that Poe did become this great legendary kung fu master that he dreamed of being. And that really ultimately, him fulfilling his dream, him growing as a character in each movie, and affecting those around him, makes for good movies. And it makes for movies that you can rewatch and enjoy every time. Talking about him, teaching as much as he's taught. In Kung Fu Panda 1, when you actually first meet the five and Shifu, and they're, you see that Shifu's high-strung. Shifu and Tigress are high-strung. They're serious, no-nonsense. But with the influence of Poe and with the push of Oogway, you see that, the ice starts melting on all of them. The only ones that were even remotely nice to Poe, really at the beginning, were, of the five, and so were Mantis and Viper. Viper being the nicest. Mantis ended up warming up to him. Crane was a bit of a dick to him, but still warmed up. Monkey was the second douchiest, but again, he warmed up too. And with this levity that Poe brought, him being funny, and and him bringing this element that they hadn't had in their lives for possibly ever, it was nice. And Tigress, you see that, Tigress hates Po hardcore because she thinks that he stole her place as the Dragon Warrior. And at the very least, she wants someone who she would respect as a martial artist, to be the Dragon Warrior. Ultimately, she and Shifu and the rest of the five do come to realize that just because Po is a fat panda doesn't mean that he's, not worthy of being the Dragon Warrior. And you see this respect change. And you see that the change really affects Shifu in the end of the movie. You see his demeanor has changed, the way he talks to Po, and he even gets playful and friendly with him. Stuff he had never done before throughout the movie. And we hadn't seen since, before Tai Lung, betrayed them and tried to steal the Dragon Scroll. But you see this stuff, in Kung Fu Panda 2. The five are a lot more friendly with Po and work with him a lot better. I think one of the best showcases of this is the Musicians Village fight. When you see Po working with all of the five, and sure, there are times when he'll need a little bit of help, like he'll need Crane to just grab him and reorient him in the air so he lands on his feet. Or, he needs help from Viper and help from Mantis. And working with Tigress and Monkey. You see this affect them. And ultimately, they have come to trust and respect him. And even by the time of Kung Fu Panda 3, when Shifu names Po as their teacher, they're like, alright. They don't question it. They respect Shifu and Po enough to just go with it. And that, went horribly wrong. But you see that, and you see this growth from their characters. And you see that Po does learn, and Po does grow as a character, but a lot of the characters around him grow. And even his dad, the Goose, grows. And even his father, Lee, in Kung Fu Panda 3 grows, because, he did make some selfish decisions. But ultimately, he does come around. And the fact that you have this growth from all the characters, not just the main character, but the cast surrounding him, the main cast, that's really what makes these movies, I think, interesting, because it's not just about Po. Yes, Po's the main character, Po's the star, Po's, the chosen one, more or less, but it doesn't feel forced, because you see that this growth doesn't just affect him. It affects everyone, and he does bring a positive effect overall into people's lives, and they bring a positive effect into him. It's a give and take, and so Po doesn't. I think one of the reasons why Po doesn't feel, Mary Sue-ish, even though he does pick up some uber powerful skills like that, is because there is build up to it, and there is enough development with the characters that we care about these characters. So I wouldn't particularly argue calling Po pulling the wishy finger hold out of his butt in the last part of the movie, a bit of a Deus Ex Machina, but it doesn't feel like a Deus Ex Machina, and it functionally isn't. Because of the strong writing. And that's ultimately, the strong writing really here is, I can't stress this enough, this is the importance of strong writing. Even Kung Fu Panda 1, which wasn't as good of a movie as its sequels, is still good because of the solid writing to it. And ultimately, paired with the, set up with the trilogy, you get an improvement. That's how good the writing is, that these movies improve when you connect them to each other. Because you start saying these things that weren't there before, and it's mind-blowing at first when you're watching this. And really, and that's really it, and I think I've kind of exhausted this topic. The story's good, the characters are good, there's a lot of development, and each movie has a strong lesson and theme, and several themes, and subplots and stuff going through it, and a very strong artistic elements to it that gets increasingly more prominent with each movie, that just make these movies so good. Gosh dang, these movies are good. Anyway, yeah, I think I've ranted enough about this topic. If you want to watch last week's topic video, you can check that out here. If you want to watch next week's topic video, you can check that out here when I get that done. If you want to submit a topic, if you're on YouTube, you can simply comment below. If you're on Tumblr, you can send me an ask and do topic : and whatever you want me to talk about. And just make sure to follow the rules that I'll be posting down below on both Tumblr and YouTube. And yeah, thank you for watching.